Right now, if a baby started crying in the next room, you'd probably wait. You'd assume someone else has it, a parent, a partner, someone whose job it is. And if it turned out no one did, you'd feel a flicker of something close to panic, because in your world, a child belongs to one or two people, and everyone else is just a bystander. But for almost the entire history of our species, that idea would have been insane. A crying baby was never one person's problem. It was everyone's. And the way your ancestors raised their children was so different from the way we do it now that it quietly reshaped our entire species. It's the reason your brain is the size it is. It's the reason your grandmother exists. Let's start with the problem. Because a human baby is a disaster. Think about a baby deer. Within an hour of being born, it's standing. Within a day, it can run. Almost every animal on Earth arrives more or less ready to survive, but a human baby arrives helpless. It can't walk, it can't cling, it can't feed itself, it can't even hold up its own head. And it stays this useless for years. No other creature produces something so demanding and so fragile. So why would evolution build a baby this broken? The answer is your brain. Somewhere along the line, human brains grew enormous, too enormous. A baby's head became so large that if it stayed in the womb any longer, it wouldn't fit through the birth canal. So we started being born early, underdone. Every human baby is, in a sense, a premature animal, pushed out into the world before it's finished because the alternative was a head that could never be born at all. And that created a crisis because a helpless baby needs constant care for years. And here's the part that changes everything. A single mother could not do it alone, not in a world of predators, hunger, and endless walking. If human mothers had raised children the way a mother chimp does, entirely on her own, our species would have died out. The math simply doesn't work. One woman cannot gather enough food, stay alert to danger, and carry a helpless infant for years without help. So we didn't raise children alone, we raised them together. Anthropologists have a word for this: alloparenting. It means care given by someone who isn't the biological parent. And in hunter-gatherer societies, it's not the exception, it's the entire system. Among the Ife people of the Congo, researchers found that a newborn is held by other people, not its mother, for about 40% of its first few months of life. By the time an Ife baby is a few weeks old, it has been passed between as many as 14 different people in a single day. Sisters, aunts, grandmothers, cousins, older children, sometimes women who aren't related at all. The baby moves from arms to arms to arms. It is never the property of one person. It belongs to the group. And this wasn't a nice bonus, it was survival itself. The anthropologist Sarah Hrdy argued that humans could only afford such expensive, slow-growing children because the load was shared across many hands. She called us cooperative breeders, a species that raises its young as a team. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The reason you can even exist, the reason your ancestors survived long enough to have you, is that no child was ever raised by just a mother and a father. But who did most of the extra work? You might assume it was other young women. It wasn't. It was the old ones. In 1997, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes studied the Hadza of Tanzania and noticed something strange. The hardest working, most productive food gatherers in the entire camp weren't the young mothers. They were the grandmothers, women in their 60s still walking miles every day, digging up more food than anyone and handing almost all of it to their grandchildren. This became known as the grandmother hypothesis. And it answers a question most people never think to ask. Why do human women live for decades after they can no longer have children? Almost no other animal does this. A female chimp is fertile until nearly the end of her life, but a human woman can live 30, 40 years past menopause. Why? The answer is that a grandmother who stops having her own babies and instead feeds her daughter's babies makes the whole family more successful. More of those grandchildren survive, and the genes for a long, helpful old age get passed down again and again. In other words, grandmothers may be one of the reasons humans live as long as we do. Your long life might be a gift from ancient women who chose to feed children instead of having their own, but the sharing didn't stop with food and grandmothers. There was something else, and it's the part we've almost completely lost. Children were not raised by adults at all, not mostly. The anthropologist David Lancy studied dozens of traditional societies and found the same pattern everywhere. Children spent most of their day not with parents, but in mixed age groups of other children. A 3-year-old was watched by a 7-year-old. A 7-year-old was watched by a 12-year-old. Older kids taught younger kids how to walk, how to talk, how to find food, how to behave. Adults rarely stepped in. A child who fell down was usually picked up by another child. A child who asked a question was usually answered by a sibling, not a parent. This is how humans learned for hundreds of thousands of years, not in classrooms, not from lessons, but by watching and copying the people slightly older than them all day, every day. A Hadza boy of 8 could take a bow and come back with a bird, not because anyone taught him a lesson, but because he'd spent his whole short life playing at exactly that, alongside the older boys who already knew how. The children raised each other, and through that they became competent long before we'd ever expect a modern child to. But none of this was gentle in the way we imagined, because the shadow over every ancient childhood was death. In a hunter-gatherer camp, roughly 4 out of every 10 children never reached the age of 15. Let that sit for a moment. Nearly half. Every parent expected to bury children. Every child grew up watching siblings disappear. Illness, injury, hunger, all of it fell hardest on the young. And so the many hands weren't just love. They were insurance. The more people invested in a child, the better its chances. A baby with a grandmother, aunts, older siblings, and a whole camp watching over it was a baby far more likely to live. And sharing children wasn't sentimental. It was the thin line between a child who made it and one who didn't. So look at what we've done. We took a species built to raise children in a crowd of dozens, and we shrank the crowd to almost nothing. And we put 1 or 2 exhausted parents alone in a house and called it normal. We invented the idea that raising a child is a private job, done behind closed doors by people who are somehow supposed to manage what an entire village once carried. And then we wonder why it feels so impossibly hard, because it was never meant to be done this way. Your body, your instincts, the deep programming of your species, all of it expects many hands. It expects grandmothers. It expects other children. It expects a group. For 300,000 years, no baby cried alone in a quiet room, waiting for one tired person to come. There was always someone, an aunt, a sister, a grandmother, a cousin, a whole camp of people who understood without ever being told that this child belonged to all of them. We were built to raise our children together, and somewhere along the way, we forgot.